Hi, I'm Alex Berlin. Welcome back to the On the House podcast produced by Rochester Homes. We're starting off New Year. It's January of 2020, and one of the first things that we want to talk about this year is energy efficiency, as usual. So Zach is with me here today. Zach Stiers, part of our marketing team, and he had asked me what all the buzz was about net zero energy homes. So we're just going to do a little question and answer for him here today, and hopefully answer some of his questions and your questions that you might have about energy efficiency and net zero energy ready homes. How's it going, Zach?
Good. How are you?
Good. How's 2020 starting off for you?
Busy.
Yeah, busy. Awesome.
So you get that little break, and then all of a sudden you got to start right back up where you left off. Yeah, but I just here recently, it just feels like everybody in the building industry has like been hitting hard on one, just energy efficiency, but then two, like net zero homes.
Yeah.
So I guess just to start off, what is a definition of a net zero home, I guess?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the name's pretty self-explanatory, but the goal of a net zero home is to not produce any more energy, not use any more energy than it produces. So there's got to be something on the home that creates energy usage to offset the drain that humans will have in trying to mainly heat and cool their home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So net zero energy would be a home that's actively doing that. And then a lot of the buzz too is about building to be net zero energy ready, so that you could later on invest in a solar panel. Would be probably the number one way of doing it. That would actually bring you down to net zero. So there's net zero, which means you're fully functional, and then there's net zero energy ready, which means the home's constructed in a method that is going to make you net zero once you add in some kind of panel or energy producer.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about the net zero ready part.
Yep. So that's what we get asked about the most because we're a home builder.
Yeah.
You know, people understand that we may not be the installer of the actual appliance that's going to create and generate the power. You know, that might be a local company to you. Check with your local energy companies. They might know who the best is in your area, but we're going to build the home a certain way, and then you're going to, finish the setup to get it to actual net zero function.
Yeah. Well, I guess that brings it in to my next question is, you said some people like to ask you those questions of can we get the home net zero ready? So obviously with a stick-built construction, you can have a little more flexibility on...
Zach, not on this podcast. We don't say stick-built. Site-built, man.
Built.
Come on.
Man, I even watched the last video.
Yeah, site-built.
Yeah,
we use the same sticks.
Yes. So in a modular construction, how easy, or I guess is it even possible to get that home to a net zero ready, or to help with the process with their builder to make the home net zero?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the biggest things in getting to a net zero energy ready house would be controlling the airflow in the home. Okay. So if anybody out there who's listening doesn't follow Fine Home Building or Construction Instruction, they're two really good resources. They're on Instagram and Facebook and everything. Check their websites as well. But there's a couple things you want to focus on. You want to focus on the airflow within the house, and then you want to focus on the insulation in the house as well. And then you want to focus on some major components like windows, appliances, water heaters, furnaces. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the question, remind me, that you asked me was...
Well, one, is it possible to do it in a modular construction?
So how's modular construction affected when you try to... Okay. So where I was going with that was it's just become... When I started in the industry 10 years ago, it was, can you build a green home? Okay. Yeah. And so you had people who were trying to use recycled materials, which is great. They were trying to get to a green level that had some kind of rating that was brought about by some, third party. And what we found as we dug into it as a company was that people weren't willing to pay for the products that it took to become a green built home. So after that wave kind of passed, everyone really started to focus on energy efficiency finally. So I'll say it's a newer trend, but it's been, at least 5-6 years that it's been heavily on the radar, at least in the Midwest, that we've got to be better about energy efficiency. So at that time, you saw code changes go into place in the residential code that said you've got to start bringing your air exchanges down on a house. Okay?
Yeah.
And then states started to actually adopt that a few years later. So just here recently, Iowa adopted it a couple years ago. Michigan adopted it a couple years ago. Indiana, I think, either just recently adopted it or is adopting it currently. But they're putting in the latest energy efficiency codes that will force all builders to get down to a certain number of air exchanges per hour. Okay. I want to say that the NHB is pushing to get everybody to do 3 air changes per hour or less.
Yeah,
that's what
right.
The NHB says is best practice. The codes are not caught up to that yet. So I believe in Michigan right now, you're more like 7 air changes per hour. I think they're maybe pushing towards 5 right now, but they're not quite down to 3. So from the people that I've talked to, at least, what we found is that site builders were having to change the way that they built a little bit to catch up to this. And to finally get back to your question in a long-winded way, we haven't actually had to change anything as these regulations have started to be put on us. We've been building the same way for a long time. And because modular construction is backwards in some cases of how a site-built home is built, we have access, like in our case. Okay, so if you're going to go site build a home, to be very clear, you're going to try to get it weatherproof first thing. Okay, so you're going to put your sticks up on top of your foundation, and then you're going to put your OSB or whatever, plywood, whatever you're using, and you're going to get that home weather tight as quickly as possible. Then you're going to go inside and you're going to insulate. You're going to put the receps on. You're going to put the drywall on. Okay, so you've just built your cavity with trying to get your head dry first. Okay. Modular construction doesn't have to worry about that. We're building in a enclosed environment, climate controlled environment, and we can build backwards from that. So what we like to do is we build our walls in panels, and then we drywall our walls first, only one side of them. We pick them up, we stack them, and once that home is into station, once that floor is into station, then we put those walls onto that floor. So if you can imagine with me, you've got a floor, OSB decking on it, you've got a wall built out of 2x6s or 2x4s, depending on if it's exterior or interior wall, and half your drywall on. So I can walk around the exterior perimeter of each one of my modules, and I can inspect any cut that I'm going to make into the drywall, or any any drilled hole I'm going to make from the floor up into the wall cavity, and I can put either a fireproof spray foam or a fireproof caulking on that hole. And right there, we stop a lot of air movement. And what you'll learn if you do a lot of research on getting to net zero or just energy efficiency in general is the biggest thing you can do is stop airflow and control it. And then you want to put on a warm jacket after that. You want to put on a nice insulating layer. And then, of course, you want to prevent weather from you want to put on a weather-resistant barrier of some sort. So stopping airflow is major. So because we were building inside out all along, because it's more production efficient, we're able to go around to any cut in the thermal envelope, and we spray foam or spray caulk that, and then we put our insulation in. And because we've been building with 2x6 walls for so long, because we're going to transport this home down the road and we want it to be stronger, our industry's been 2x6 for a long time. A lot of site builders, just trying to focus on affordability, which we get, have been using 2x4 exterior walls. Well, now everyone is realizing that 2 inches gives you a much higher insulation rate. So between our airflow stoppage and our higher amounts of insulation, we're ahead of the game. The other thing we do is we're able to caulk underneath all of our walls before we set them down on the floor. So as you can imagine, you've got imperfect wood-to-wood connections. Anytime you put wood-to-wood together, it's imperfect, especially OSB is a process building material. The bottom plate of your wall could have a barked edge or something on it. So anytime we make a wood-wood connection on the thermal envelope, we try to put a caulking or some kind of something that's going to stop air movement again. So all in all, the way that they tested this, the new energy requirements, is they do a blower door test.
Yeah.
And you've heard of that.
Yeah.
So the blower door test, for those of you that don't know, I'm going to hook up a fan to one door on my house, and I'm going to shut every other door and window when the house has been built already. And then that fan is actually going to pull air out of the house. And it's going to pull it out to a rating of negative 50 kilopascals. So it's going to depressurize the house, and it's going to tell you how hard it's working to get to that pressure rating. And then you can do a conversion on that to find out how many air changes per hour at ACH 50 that you get during that blower door test. And so that's where I'm getting that number of, the NHB wants 3, the building, the regulatory departments are getting down between 7 and 5 right now. That's how we test that number. So our homes are being tested, again, without any major change in the way that we've been building homes.
Yeah.
At the very least, since I've been here, if not since, the second generation was here at the company, we've been building the same way all along. But because we're in a controlled environment and we have very detailed processes to check on our building envelope, we're coming in at, in the high 1s and in the mid 2s. With very little change in how we build. So that was a super long-winded answer to the question of how is modular construction ready for net zero energy or different than site building.
Well, and I mean, all that stuff's like standard, correct? Like we do that on every single home. So you're almost like, even if I was to come to you and it was like, Alex, I want to build a net zero home, you're already like part of the way there, because standard practices for modular construction is you're already doing those steps that would be necessary if you wanted a net zero home.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right. So then there's going to be some stuff that you and your builder need to talk about on site, and some of it's regulated depending on the state you're in. If you're in Michigan now, you have to have a climate controlled crawl space. Or a basement. Obviously, most people want climate controlled anyways, but there's no more, cold crawl spaces in Michigan. So that's going to help your energy efficiency. Indiana, I don't think, has caught up to that yet, if I'm correct, but I think a lot of building experts are going that way anyways. So, regulate the environment in your crawl space, which also brings you the ability to put all of your HVAC equipment into the thermally protected envelope. So I'm going to have my furnace, my return air grills, my return air chases, my return air feeds. I'm going to put my main ducting and my boots and registers. They're all in the insulated space. Yeah. And because they're in the insulated space, you don't have to worry about leaky air ducts anymore. So in the past, in older houses, if I was on a crawl space that was totally unconditioned, not thermally regulated, I've got, it's supposed to be warmer down there, and it is. You got some ground heat coming up, but still on a 20-degree day, your crawl space is, maybe it's going to be 30, 40 degrees. It's much colder than the air that you're throwing through your furnace, right? Yeah. And so if you don't wrap that ducting in some kind of insulation, you are going to lose a ton of heat as you try to heat your home. So it's just a very inefficient way to do it. So if the HVAC equipment is in the conditioned spaces, you're just going to be that much less prone to leak air or to cost yourself more money as you try to heat through a cold area, stuff like that. Yeah. The other stuff you're going to be doing on site that's going to help you out too when you're doing this is HVAC equipment. That's going to be a big deal. Talk to your builder about the most energy efficient equipment you can get. And I'll say that, from the building trade shows that I've been to in the last few months and years, especially months, the heat pump technology is coming a really long way. And a lot of people are afraid of heat pumps because they think that in cold climates like northern Indiana and Michigan, that they're not going to keep up with how cold it gets in the winter. But do your research, make sure your builder is up to date on those trends, because it's really come a long way. And if I could put a heat pump outside and then put a gas furnace inside, and I can heat my house down to 20 degrees with that heat pump comfortably, I've just saved the cost to heat my house with my furnace, which is only 95% efficient furnace, there's an efficiency rating there that you lose. I've lost, I've saved, that furnace running from 20 degrees to 60 degrees, and then in the summers too, heat pumps are more efficient than typical air conditioners. So at least for 75% of the year, you're going to get some kind of return on your investment. And then when you get into the very cold temperatures, and most thermostats, at least the digital thermostats, give you the ability to set the break point too.
Yeah.
So if you don't want it to drop below 20 without kicking over your gas furnace, that's where you set it. So anyways, then you finally kick over to your furnace, your house is nice and warm, and you've still, you've got a really energy efficient system.
Yeah. I mean, I have a heat pump, and I definitely, the summer's electricity bill,
yeah,
cheap.
Yeah.
And then I had the kick, so I might have to talk with you on how to set that. I think the setting might be too high. Because it shot from $80 to $138.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's been that cold here recently, so.
Yeah, no, we've had a pretty mild winter so far, so yeah, we might need to go look at that. You live in an older Rochester home.
Yeah.
So that's kind of important to point out. Someone had the foresight to put an energy efficient heating system on your house, but you live in a home that we built how many years ago? 2002, and it's still a really tight house because we've been building like this for a long time. So that's a good point right there.
But yeah. So I guess there's another point. I guess the R value and insulation matters, I guess. Mm-hmm. At least according to some of the research I've done before this, like the R value is like crucial in getting a net zero home. Is that more on like getting the tightness of your home as well as like just insulating your home overall?
So R value refers to resistance, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so if I've got a really warm home and a really cold outside, that warm air is going to eventually, even if it's a totally perfectly tight home, there's a little bit of conduction going on where that heat's going to escape to the colder outside through your insulation. So insulation doesn't necessarily stop airflow, it just resists, it just slows it down.
Yeah.
So if I've got a 4-inch wall and I can get it's actually 3.5 inches, so I can get an R11 or an R13 in there in the cavity, then that home is going to resist obviously losing its heat in the winter much less than a higher R value is all that means. So our homes are standard with R21 in the walls because we've got a 2x6 wall, so you've got a 5.5 inch cavity there. So I'll say that it's important, but I'll also say that there's a point of diminishing returns. Like, where does most of your heat get lost from would be the question I would ask. If I'm going to chase down energy efficiency, I want to focus on the big things first, right? As the French say, ROI is king. So I'm going to focus on the big things that cost me the least. So I want to focus on tightness first, personally.
Yeah.
I think that tightness is the key. Don't let air leakage out. Don't let, don't force your furnace to run because you're constantly losing air out through your receps, let's say, or a hole in the wall that you didn't know about, or whatever. Now, they used to talk about it's important because once you get a home to a certain tightness level, you've got to start controlling the airflow in it.
Yeah. And
people ask, can a home get too tight? In fact, I asked that to the guys at construction instruction a few years ago at IBS because they were pushing tight. And I said, at what point is too tight? Because, our parents grew up in homes that breathed.
Yeah.
So they didn't get to a point where they had mold concerns. Maybe if they were gone for a week and they shut the furnace off and it was a hot, humid time, they wouldn't have to worry about that. And they also have tied health concerns into this because at a certain level of tightness, you've got the flu bug floating around your house, and in a dry winter where the bug doesn't catch moisture molecules and drop down to the ground, it's up in the air, you're breathing it in, and you've got to control some fresh air inflow and outflow. So people are saying, well, if you build it too tight, then you can't get that fresh air in and out, and you've gone too far with this. The construction instruction guys answered the question and said, well, why would you want to build a tight home but not get it so tight that you're in control, right? Mm-hmm. Like, ultimately, we're all control freaks in one way or another, and their point was be totally in control and then regulate your airflow. So they would say something like, and in fact, this is also going into code, and Michigan's the only state we deal with right now, maybe Iowa too, actually, now that I say that, that's saying you have to regulate the airflow along with the getting tested, make sure your house is tight, blower door tested, get it down to a certain level, and then regulate the airflow. So the most affordable way to do that is to get like a whole house vent fan, not an old whole house fan, to be clear, but this is a small fan. It's a 1x1 fan you put in the ceiling in a main area, and it should run all the time, and it's slowly and softly, negatively pressurizing your house, so that when you go open a door or a window, you get more fresh air in than you would if you just passively did that. Yeah. So the problem with that is you're not really regulating it. You're just relying on the happenstance of you open a door, and unfortunately a lot of people open their garage door first, and you could have some car fumes in there. That's where you maybe store your paint and your gasoline and stuff. Yeah. So some people would say that's not the healthiest way to go about it either. So the other thing to do would be to regulate it through some kind of ERV or HRV, which are recovery ventilation systems. They're tied into your HVAC system in most cases, and then you're bringing in fresh air at a rate that's relative to how many people are living in the house, and then you're kicking out some of your stale air. And in doing that, you cross the air streams. They don't physically interact with each other, but you cross them with a barrier in between them, and you heat cold air with warm air as it comes in through the mechanism. And then again, the goal is to not work your furnace so hard, so you've got a medium temperature air that's coming into your house, and it doesn't take as much to get it up to 70 degrees or something like that. So the answer that I've heard, and I like to, is there a too tight point, would be no, get it as tight as you can and then control it. Yeah. And that relates heavily back to your net zero energy home building, because if that furnace is running often to reheat very cold air that you've let in your house because you opened a door or window and it's sucked in, versus if you're heating air that's at that medium temperature with a recovery ventilator system, you're going to be that much closer to the net zero energy that you're chasing. Yeah,
and that's interesting because a lot of people that I've read, one of their key things that I looked up, like, what is the key things that every net zero home has to have? A lot of people were saying those fresh air systems are a key part to achieving net zero homes. Yeah. So it's interesting you brought that up.
Yeah, they're a little bit more helpful than the passive system I mentioned first, and then of course both those systems are better than nothing in a tight home. And again, I'm maybe skirted your question about the insulation. So let me get back to that. I do believe that tightness is the bigger factor, but then after that, of course, get yourself insulation up to a certain value. We push our 21 on the sidewalls. How much more are you willing to pay for a thicker sidewall or for a foam to get your sidewall rating to a 30, R30 or an R50 or something? Our argument would be probably most of your heat is, rising, heat rises and, cooled air drops. And are you losing most of it through your ceiling and not through your sidewalls? So, we would really urge people to study the return on the investment of spray foaming a full wall cavity, to get your insulation values higher when you're maybe not losing as much energy out your sidewalls as you are out your ceiling. So our line of thinking is, let's control the air by spray foaming any cuts to the building envelope, but then let's have a decent amount of insulation. R21's good amount of insulation on sidewalls. Let's not go overboard and cost people a lot of money by getting an R50 in your sidewalls, would be our argument. Yeah. And then in the ceiling, though, let's go to that R50 level. And again, with that method, we're testing really well with our tightness, most importantly, and then we're getting people to have low energy bills because we've got a good blanket around that. So it is important, to answer your question. Tightness comes first, though, and then there's a point of diminishing returns with insulation.
Yeah, that's interesting. In this article, with your standard installations you're doing now, with insulation at least, you're like halfway there to the R value. Now, obviously, the R value is great for every home that we do, but if you wanted to take that next step, like you said, you got to evaluate your return on taking that next step if you wanted to achieve net zero.
Yeah, because how long is it going to take you to make the money back?
That's
for that extra insulation, and especially if you're a first-time home buyer, or this isn't your retirement dream home. Very few people stay in homes for 30 years anymore. So unless you're going to do that, you got to really study where that return on investment kicks back to you.
And I guess that leads into one of my bigger questions, like, are net zero homes even worth it, like right now? Or is it one of those things that we need those people to take, the first people to build those homes, to take that leap, so future families and future homeowners can then benefit from that? So eventually, hopefully, every home becomes a net zero energy home, or as many as we can get out there.
Well, yeah, I think from somebody who has kids, and from somebody who loves being in the outdoors and stuff, I think we owe it to our kids and future generations to be more energy conscious and not be as wasteful as maybe we have been in the past. So I like the idea of going as energy efficient as you can afford to go. And again, I'll kind of answer your question by getting back to that point that there's a difference between a net zero energy home and a net zero energy ready home. So if all construction can be pushing towards net zero energy ready while still focusing on affordability, because there's a real affordability crisis in our country. So if you can build, and I'm going to tout us here because I feel like we've done a really good job of towing the line of building a very tight home, having good amounts of insulation, but not pushing expensive things like fully spray foamed walls, onto people just to say that we're that much closer to net zero. So then once you build that really tight home, you could live in that home for a few years before you go out and spend the money to go add on solar or something. I feel like the real expense is going to come in when you add on those solar panels. Yeah. Prices are dropping on solar panels as we get more and more into them, as the technology continues to get better and better. So that's a great thing. Yeah. So maybe 5 years down the road, the answer is, I've built my house net zero energy ready. I know I'm going to be here for a long time. I've built up some cash flow after the initial spend of the down payment on the house and the construction and all that. So maybe now I have the cash to go out and add solar to my house, and I can make it full net zero. Yeah. So then, is it worth it? It's totally up to every homeowner. I don't. I've done a little bit of research on it, and I think the bare minimum that people say you're going to see a return on investment if you live in a great solar state like California would be like 8 years. Yeah. Indiana, there's no way. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a little bit, and I wanted to look up Indiana just for our sakes where we're at, and it said at the best 12 years, it's going to take you 12 years just to get a return on investment on that. And I think it is those solar panels. I think that's the biggest thing. Trying to get that renewable energy. Yeah. It comes at a price.
Yeah, and then you got to, at 10 to 12 years, you got to start thinking about when are my appliances going to need enough maintenance or even replacement that I'm not really going to even see the return on investment still. Hey, your furnace and your heat pump should last that long. Don't get me wrong, but things go wrong, and homeowners end up having to be homeowners, and they take the expense of that. Yeah. So factor a little bit of maintenance into your calculations as well.
Yeah, that's crazy. 12 years. I almost think you just gotta, like you said, evaluate where you are in life. Like, obviously, if you think it's going to be your retirement home, like, it might be an easier decision. That's like doing one of those next steps of, hey, for future generations, like, this is going to be my forever home. And then for future generations, this is going to be a home that would be worth better to the environment for future generations.
Yeah. So it's just what's important to you, right?
Yeah. Have you heard anything on what about so I bought a net zero home. I've lived in it for a few years, but like got a new job and you're leaving. Have you heard anything on what the value of those homes are? Like, are they more do they value higher or praise higher than normal homes, or?
Yeah, I am hearing that they're coming in a little bit higher than a non-net zero energy ready home. And that's because you can make the argument that you're out of pocket, you don't
have to pay for those.
Yeah,
things.
Your out of pocket bills is going to be so much less. It depends on the area too. If you're in an area with really low gas prices and the people are out shopping houses that have gas furnaces, maybe it's not going to be as big of a deal. Again, if you're in California and electricity bill is super high and you're in an area where everything's on electric, maybe it's going to have a lot more return on that investment. So again, depends on where you're shopping, obviously, as all realty does. But I think we're seeing that they do at least have a minimal value above a home that's even decently taking care of its energy costs.
Okay. I mean, I've just done a little bit of research, and I guess I would just the final things I'd like to talk about is just some of the innovations that are being produced to help this. I mean, I think I sent you that link the other day with Matt Rice's video on those T studs.
Yeah.
But those are interesting that the studs of your home at least are being developed. There's research in there to make your studs more insulated.
Yeah.
So it gives you even more of an R value right away, and you haven't even put any insulation. Technically, haven't put any insulation in.
Yeah. And I don't know that I haven't seen a lot of research on the cost of those. I would wonder. I would wonder if the cost is worth the return. I'd say that with trepidation because I don't know that much about it, to be clear. But it's also not that expensive to. The other way to protect or insulate your studs would be to come around on the outside of the home with a foam board.
Yeah, that's my other thing. So at least, I don't know personally how long it's been around, but I brought that up to you that I recently discovered the foam board compared to just putting OSB or whatever around the home.
Well, so you'd have your structural sheathing, your OSB still, and then you'd have your Tyvek, and then you'd put your foam board outside of that even. It changes the way that you do your windows a little bit and the way that you do your jambs on your doors and such. And it, unfortunately, so the codes are starting to try the overarching international residential code is it's in there that every home should have, they call it continuous insulation. So you have to have some form where you don't have some form of insulation so that you don't have a connection from your drywall to the stud to your OSB to the outside of the house without having insulation in there somewhere. And I think the most affordable method is probably what we're talking about, which would be wrapping the house in insulation. But it's still not that affordable, and it still hasn't been proven to be such a return on investment that most states are actually adopting it into the code. So they're not doing it yet. The states aren't doing it yet, at least nowhere that we build yet, because it just doesn't make enough sense to enough people yet. And again, we have an affordability crisis. I mean, a net zero energy home, while it is important that we should all be energy conscious for future generations and for the environment, they can be expensive to get to. So that puts a strain on, millennials trying to get into the new home market when there's a shortage and they've got student loan debt and, all the other problems that you're seeing. And then, a new family trying to buy a bigger home for their kids, is it worth the extra money? Especially when you've got little kids who are going to be leaving windows and doors open and they're going to maybe kill the whole system anyways. So, there's new tech coming out to do it. We tend to say, and we're going to rely on the old tech until the new tech's very, very proven. At Rochester Homes, we do. We don't want to get caught, when you build a volume of homes and you get 100 homes out there and then find out some new piece of tech isn't worth it or it's not performing like it should. So we take our time before jumping into some stuff like that, but there are some tried and true methods to get there. I would focus more personally on some of the stuff we talked about, like tightness, windows. Windows are a big deal too. The U value of a window, which is directly related to its R value. It's the inverse. Divide the U value by 1, you'll get the R value on it. But that's got to be good as well in order to get down to the point where you're going to be able to get net zero energy ready. So make sure your windows are at the very least Energy Star rated for the area that you're living in. That's a good start, but also do your research on what net zero energy suggests you get your U values to in your region, in your climate region. And then again, stuff like appliances that are going to be a heavy drain on your energy. And then the HVAC system is a big deal.
Yeah, and looking up, I looked up examples of net zero homes. I was amazed. You were talking about the windows, which I think could be a whole nother conversation for someone else. But like the giant windows on a net zero home, I would have thought that like giant windows would be letting, hot air escape or letting cold air in. But it was still possible to have a net zero home, and still depending on if you have those Energy Star rated windows. And,
Sure. And you got to pay attention to where the home is at.
Yeah.
And you're seeing, let's say we put a home in northern Minnesota. Mm-hmm. That home's going to be cold more often than that home is warm. So if I face, the living side of my house, so I've got my living room, let's say my living room, my kitchen, my master bedroom are all on the south face of that house, and I want to put some monster windows in there, and then I'm going to let the sun passively heat the big living areas of my home for most of the year when it needs that heat. So it can actually be a tool in your favor to use direction and glass to do some passive heating of your home. And that's the next level past net zero, would be a passive house, where you're not just producing enough energy, net zero, you're going to produce enough energy to offset your use. Passive is you can be, off the grid, and it's going to actually save you money all year round, which that's pretty hard to get to. And I should say the net zero energy rating that's done by the HERS rating. So when you build your home, when you finish your home, obviously, start thinking about it way before you get to this point. You should be planning, and there's energy companies who can help you do this, but whoever your HERS rater is could actually help you in the planning of your home to get to the point where all the components that are going in, all the construction techniques, so that you can get to net zero energy. But then that same company would come out at the end of the day, test your home. They're going to blow it or test your home. They're going to rate it on several other factors, and they'll give you a HERS rating. Mm-hmm. And a HERS rating of 100, I want to say, is like the average home, and then 0 is the net zero home. So if you get a HERS rating of 30, then you're 70% better than the average home, is I think how it works. So,
which I would think is outstanding.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good rating. Yeah. But then at 30, you'll find out what you'll know you need to offset your energy by X, and that's how you find out how many solar panels you need depending on their output and such.
So even if you don't get to 0, there's a way to achieve 0 based on offsetting or adding another solar panel or
because remember, it's a net zero. So I'm going to be I'm going to start off at 30, I'm going to offset with solar, and then I'm going to vacillate depending on winter and summer, depending whether or not I'm using energy or I'm actually creating energy and giving it back to the grid. And then of course you got to make sure that your grid's going to pay you for that energy properly, and then you're at 0 technically. So it's the net factor that plays all that into it.
Cool. No, that's all the questions I had for net zero. I know a lot more about it now, even with the little research that I did. So. Yeah,
it's a really cool concept, and if you can afford to do it, great. Definitely start the planning of it with your builder way before you start swinging hammers and putting nails in. But if you can't afford to get it, just try to build as energy efficiently as possible, which is what we do. Make sure your construction method is as energy efficient friendly as possible, and then just make sure to put good components like windows, appliances that are Energy Star rated, and then your HVAC system is a big part of it. And just make sure you do your research as a potential buyer to get a real efficient system. That would be my overall advice.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the
Thanks for the questions.
Yeah. Well, that's it for me.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening to the On the House podcast today. You can find this podcast pretty much anywhere you find podcasts.
Yeah.
iTunes and Spreaker. And
Spreaker, YouTube. You can see the video version on YouTube now. That's new for 2020.
Okay, cool. Well, Zach's our tech guy on the marketing team, so he's the one producing all these. He's the one posting them all and doing all the tech side of it. So thanks, Zach, and appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks.